Hello and welcome to the F.E.E.L podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Crook, and today we're showing up here live on Substack. And if you miss the live, don't worry, you can catch it later, either right here on Substack with the recording, or on our many podcast platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen, Amazon Music, wherever you listen. But I like to come here live. You guys may have noticed I started doing this a couple weeks ago so that our listeners, our followers, our subscribers get a chance to jump in and ask questions live or share their experiences live in the comments. And then I can respond and engage with you one-on-one right here live. If you're a follower or subscriber, I can even invite you to join me on the stage if you want to. So there's a lot of options open here that I'm hoping is going to really create some personal engagement. But I also know that that doesn't always work for people. So it's going to continue to be available on the normal podcast platforms as well. But just trying to open up this new opportunity. This is our second or third week of doing this, I think. I'll be here every Tuesday. You will notice I'm here a little earlier today. I've got a lunch I want to be at to support a friend who's speaking. So I decided when I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning and realized, oh, wait a minute, I've got a conflict of time here. I'm going to switch it back, and I'm not going to apologize for it, which leads us into today's conversation, breaking the I'm sorry habit. So before I go into this, I want you to pause for a moment and think about how many times you have said, I'm sorry this week, today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you're listening, for things that aren't actually your fault, for things that aren't yours to apologize for things that don't even require an apology, like taking up space in a room or on a sidewalk or in a walkway. There's just so many areas that, especially as women and girls, we are apologizing because what I have learned, and this is a very personal experience for me. I wrote the blog on this week instead of having our incredible award-winning writer, Jessica, do it, because it is, and it has been such a personal experience for me to walk through, break the habit from, recover from, get curious about where it started and why I was doing it, all the things. So we're going to talk about breaking the I'm sorry habit today. And hopefully this will help you to stop and pause and consider, think about other ways you can phrase it, think about if it's something you should actually be apologizing for, or just getting curious. Where did this come from? Where's this narrative lead back to? When did I start doing this? I think because it has a bigger impact than I think we realize it does. Because if we are showing up with I'm sorry language, we're sending a signal that we believe we're an inconvenience or we're in the way somehow. And that is not the message we want to be sending about ourselves. We are valuable. We are worthy. We get to choose. We get to take up space and have a voice and have an opinion and be heard and be seen and be known. We don't need to make small to shrink ourselves anymore. And I think those are messages we have gotten over time from culture and society. And I want to talk about us breaking out of that today. But let's start from the beginning with me and where this all started in my personal journey. And I think you may find that there are some things that align for you here in your story. So I started saying I'm sorry at a very early age. I don't remember a season in my life before the age of 4 that I was not apologizing, sometimes profusely for things that weren't my fault, whether I was talking too loudly, walking too loudly. And this got set up a little bit early on. My dad was a shift worker. So my brothers and I had to do a lot of tiptoeing around, especially in the summertime when we were home and he was sleeping. And so some of it came from that, but then it expanded into other spaces. I learned early on that my presence was too much for the adults around me to handle unless I was helping in some way or off by myself, entertaining myself, but not making any kind of noise, not challenging any kind of narrative. and that I was just supposed to be convenient, be a helper, stay out of the way. I can't tell you how many times I heard as a kid to just stay out of the way, literally those words. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think that that is something that was very prominent in my generation and generations before, and has continued in some areas that we still have to work on. This is not completely erased from society. I'm still working with young women, college age women that have been chronic I'm sorryers. So it's still present. And I think it's more present in some areas than others. It's very present in patriarchal societies. It's very present in a lot of faith spaces and cultural narratives. So, and it's one of those things that can be easy to miss if we don't stop and pay attention, but we underestimate the power it takes away from us when we continue to apologize for things that aren't our fault, and the message it sends that we're going to shrink back and not be feel like we should have the same space as others. So I learned early on that I was not supposed to make any kind of noise that was inconvenient for anyone else around me. Fast forward to adolescence and young adulthood, if there was any kind of an argument with a boyfriend, I was trying to solve the problem or apologizing for what I needed, even if I had not done anything wrong at all. I had been conditioned to apologize for having needs for myself, having opinions that were different from those I was in relationship with, and that everyone else in my family and romantic relationships' happiness was my responsibility. Later in college, when I met my now husband, we've been married for almost 33 years in August. He was the first person I'd met outside of a close-knit group of girlfriends that I'd grown up with, that we'd been close since grade school and high school. But he was the first person I'd met outside of that group that was accepting, appreciative, welcoming, and open to me being my full self. No apologies necessary. My existence and needs were not an inconvenience to him, and in fact were invited and welcomed. This was mind-boggling to me. I want to be very clear about what a different experience this was for me. And fortunately for me, the I'm sorry habit had been firmly solidified in my psyche. And despite my husband's encouragement and sometimes downright prodding to stop apologizing for things that were not my fault or my responsibility, I would continue to brush it off and not actually deal with it. I didn't, you're making a big deal out of nothing. I just kind of pshawed it because it was so ingrained in me until I hit the age of 50. And for those of you that have been following me since the beginning or for a while know that I hit a wall in the fall that I turned 50. I ended up in the ER twice in a 10-day period with very physical symptoms that were actually a manifestation of all the things that I had stuffed, had trauma around that I hadn't dealt with, had emotions that I was told were inconvenient for others, so I stuffed, or I just believed that about it because of things I learned early on and hadn't dealt with. And it came boiling out like a pot boiling over when it's got too much water, or it's boiling on too high, or it just doesn't have room to carry it anymore. And that was a turning point for me. So at that point, when I finally determined it was time to start healing and unpacking the trauma and unresolved emotions that I'd been carrying around for far too many years. The door first opened when this I'm sorry issue, when my therapist asked me how my self-talk was. And even though I told her it was fine, I'm like, I like myself. I know that I am worthy of being around. I don't have any self-hatred going on. She's like, just play with me on this. Just go with me. And so she challenged me to track it for a week, to just make sure we weren't missing anything. And I have a feeling she knew something before I knew it. So I reluctantly agreed. And you won't be surprised to hear that when I actually started paying attention to how my self-talk was, started tracking it in my journal, it was really shocking to me. One of the things that really showed up in this self-dialogue they did scream for my attention. I was like, and when I realized it, I was like, oh, my husband, wait till I tell him this one, was the amount of times I would say, I'm sorry for things that were not only not my fault, but there was literally nothing done wrong by me and sometimes anyone else. Sometimes it was just a matter of taking up space. How many times are you walking down the sidewalk and someone's coming the other way? And instead of just scooting over and making room, you say, I'm sorry. Think about that. If I was walking down, oh, there's my example. If I was walking down a hallway or sidewalk and someone else is coming the other way or up behind me, I was apologizing for taking up space there, for being in the way, even though I was no more in the way than the other person who was walking along. Neither of us were. We both had a right to be there. We just need to, part ways a little bit and make room for each other, which is a great metaphor for women. Instead of running each other over or apologizing for being there, let's make room for each other. Add another seat at the table. That's a conversation for another day, though. But that's just one example for how this was showing up for me. When I went to my husband and I let him know after more than 26 years of us being together, I was recognizing what he was talking about. He was thrilled. And this is the beautiful part about him and who he is as a person. There wasn't like any I told you so. There was a little bit of a smirk, but he was thrilled because he was like, gosh, finally, you're ready let's do this. You're ready to do this with me. He was so excited to be a part of this. And so I let my therapist know my husband really wants to help with this. And I know this is about me, and she loved it. She's like, an accountability partner in these situations is great. It just so happened that this was unfolding during COVID. So we were home a lot more. So he was actually home. We weren't at separate offices or workspaces all day long. He was there with me a lot to because so many times I would say it and not even know it. So he was there to catch it. And so she loved the idea of having someone eager and ready to support me and breaking this really incessant I'm sorry habit right there in my own home every day, and was a willing participant. So the journey began. Each time I would say I'm sorry for something that was not my fault, or if he caught me or I caught myself, which did start happening eventually. I eventually, when you tune into things, it's like you hear about this all the time. When you're unlearning and relearning new habits, it takes some time for them to take hold. I think there's some data out there, something about it takes 2 weeks to start a new habit. Well, some of these habits are so ingrained in us, it can take longer than that. I think that's probably a minimum. I don't have science on that, but based on my own experience, so he would and he had the additional layer of not only stopping me and catching me with the I'm sorry, but having me rephrase it into an actual true statement. So instead of walking by someone and saying I'm sorry, you can say, oh, excuse me, and scoot over to make a little bit more room. Or, it's simple. Like these words that we say regularly that our nervous system and our brain are taking in have such an impact on us. And that slight shift is really important to the messages we're sending to ourselves about our value, about our right to exist in a space. So he would have me rephrase it to an actual true statement that we agreed on, and with a lot of diligence by my husband and my therapist and determination by me that it was time to break this habit. Once you are aware of something like this, you can't ignore it anymore. And you start realizing you're staying present with yourself. You're not disassociated from it anymore. It becomes very, very obvious how much you're doing it and the impact it's having on you. And so with a lot of this diligence and commitment to this, about a year and a half later, the habit was largely broken. Or if I did start to say I'm sorry, I caught it pretty immediately and course corrected right away. And that continues to be true to this day. There are still spaces and places I'm discovering like, oh, why did I say I'm sorry there? I mean, I could say, excuse me, or may I have a minute of your time? But one of the things I work with my college students on is do not lead a sentence with, I'm sorry, can I have a little bit of your time? I'm sorry, I have a question. I'm sorry, do you have a moment? "Hey, excuse me, I have a question. Do you have a moment right now? Or we schedule time to come back later?" There's a lot of difference in that language because instead of showing up like you think you're a problem, you're taking up too much room or you're an inconvenience to them, you're simply letting them know you have a need. And if they have time to meet it right now, great, or they can schedule a time later. No one's being inconvenienced. Um, and so this is just something that you start seeing the effects and the layers that it impacts when you pay attention to this. Um, Within this, I also realized another thing came to surface. And we're going to talk about this next week. I'm going to give you a hint of it today. We're going to dive into this particular thing next week. But within this, I also realized how much over explaining I was doing. Whenever I felt like I needed to justify a choice or change my mind, my daughters started calling me out on this when they felt like I was over explaining. Um, they're like, you don't, we got it, mom. You don't need to keep explaining. You don't need to justify it. We hear you. And that was like, oh my gosh, my daughters are noticing this in me. And it was a real close companion with the I'm sorry. So if I needed to make a decision that I felt was healthiest for me, then that was good enough, period. And that was another thing that I'm still working on today. Even today, I changed the time. And my first urge is to get online and over explain, oh, I'm so sorry, to say I'm sorry. No, something came up. I want to show up for a friend. I'm adjusting the time. I hope you can join us. If not, it'll be available on a recording later, period. That is not something I would have been able to do without a very long, lengthy explanation, justification. But we're going to get into that next week and why that happens. So we're going to get into those scenarios that lead us into this, that what started, just like today. We talk about where it came from. We're going to talk about next week where the over apologizing comes from. But today, back to the I'm sorry. Start getting curious about where this came from, how long you've been doing it, if there's settings you're doing it more so than other settings. But remember, no more living like an inconvenience. We are all valuable, worthy, and get to choose. Don't ever forget that. So your ways to engage, we're going to go back to the beginning where I started. Track how many times you say I'm sorry this week. Is this something you should be actually apologizing for? Is it something that even requires an apology of any kind? What is some other language that you can replace that with rather than I'm sorry? I hope this got you to thinking today. I hope this helps you consider the ways you're talking to yourself and if they're ways that are honoring to you. And this isn't a thing of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something else wrong. No, this is an awareness thing. It's like, oh, okay, that's something I hadn't thought about before. Let's play with this and see what kind of impact it has and see if I can make some shifts here and see what happens. And let us know in the comments. Let us know in the notes. We would love to hear from you on this. I think this is something that is more common than we realize. And it's one of those things that when we stop and take a minute and take a breath and notice, these are really actionable things that we can shift that can really change the narrative in our heads of how we talk to ourselves and change the narrative how we show up in spaces. And again, I'm going to reiterate this. I said it a few minutes ago. You are valuable, you are worthy, and you get to choose. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time here on the F.E.E.L podcast.